Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Driscoll, also coming to you from Dallas. Today we are discussing spares, resolution versus contrast, top hats, and brother, can you spare a Leko? All on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Welcome, everyone, to episode 214. And today we welcome back Brother Driscoll to the show. How you doing, Driscoll?
I am great. The weather is changing here in Dallas, and life is grand.
Yes, we had a tornado last night, and it's kind of crisp today and a troubled, stormy sky.
Oh, nice. I always love the tornadoes in Dallas. I miss the tornadoes in Dallas.
The green sky. You hear the alarm and you run out and look for it.
Yeah. So, Driscoll, you're working on a show for Houston Grand Opera, is that correct?
It is. I actually finished it back in February, but the live stream of it just launched on Marquee, a streaming app for arts organizations.
Very cool. Very cool. Did you have to make some adjustments for the stream?
It was actually a wildly different kind of setup than what we did when we presented it a year ago. Marianne Song was the last show that Houston Grand Opera presented before the shutdown. And it was actually with HGO Co., which is one of their outreach programs. And it was so well received that they decided they wanted to add it to their main season of streaming. So we all came back together. Everything had been struck and gone, so we kind of had to start over again. And what I loved was they wouldn't even let me look at the stage. They put a giant monitor in front of me that showed me all the camera feeds. And I was not allowed to look at the stage, so that I was lighting it for these cameras and not for my naked eye. Which there were times I stood up and cheated because I needed to figure out what light was doing what, or
right.
You know how if the video was actually overlapping somewhere where it wasn't supposed to.
Right. So you did lighting and video for this show.
I did, and we filmed it in 2 days. It was intense.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing this. Do I have to pay money?
It's free. Absolutely free.
Oh, man, that's even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
just download the Marquee app or go to their website and then just look up Marianne's Song. It's about Marian Anderson, an African-American opera singer that really was a huge trailblazer in the industry.
Right. Yes. She's kind of really well known in the opera world. It's a pretty amazing story. And Steve, you just finished a show for Undermain, is that correct?
Yes, we have done 3 now. We did St. Nicholas by Connor McPherson. Suffocation Theory is wrapping online now by David Rabe. And in about 2 weeks, we'll be on Vimeo with Hedda Gabler, with Blake Hackler's translation.
I cannot wait for that one.
Well, and unlike Driscoll, who can clearly work at the speed of light, doing an opera in 2 days, I have a leisurely 8-day shoot for Hedda Gabler.
Wow.
Oh, that's so nice.
For Hedda Gabler, you should be able to do that in 2 hours. I mean, really, the 8 days, it's like you're doing a show in Europe or something like that.
Oh, man, we're doing it. You're doing your master shot. You're doing, close-ups. You're doing the response shot. Tonight we actually pulled the dolly out and started doing the dolly shots.
Put down
tonight.
the tracks, baby.
Yes.
Do you have any drone shots?
No, I mean, we only have a 9-foot ceiling, so we can't really do it.
You got to put a drone in there, man. You got to have drone shots now. It's fantastic. Anyway.
I think you could just lift your iPhone up over your head and get the same shot.
Yeah, right. And toss it up in the air. Yeah. And then cut it when it reaches its apex.
How long have you all been filming, Steve?
We started last night. We did 4 hours last night. So we did the first half of Act 1.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. That's one of my favorite scripts.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you guys are working. Really?
Well, I mean, Driscoll's clearly working. We were talking about you just did some plumbing at your house.
Exactly.
So the inspector came out to see if you're a master plumber.
Exactly.
Oh, how did that go? Are you a master plumber?
They just looked at the P-traps, and I had P-traps, and so they left. I got my
P-traps?
The little J-shaped thing under your sink.
You got to start somewhere, David. You start small before you put in a septic system.
I have no idea. We just have an outhouse out back. We just go out back in the backyard.
That's when you drop your wedding band down the sink. The P-trap catches it.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's what a P-trap. Wouldn't they call that a U-trap? Because it's sort of the shape of a U, isn't it? Not a P?
It's kind of a U or a J,
Yeah, like a
depending.
J. That's a poor name. Because I thought you meant P as in P-E-E. I had no idea that there was a device that traps urine in your bathroom.
Well, most people don't pee in their sink, David.
All right. Anyway, listen, before we get started with our listeners' questions, we have some big news. Wow. So the real big news is that Governor Cuomo announced the reopening of New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut on May 19th. And we're going to talk a lot more about this on today's Let's Talk About. But you know what that means? That means technically Broadway opens on May 19th. I don't think Broadway's going to be opening, but we'll talk about more about that later. But that is some pretty big news. I mean, they were originally talking about opening up New York sometime this summer and then Broadway in the fall. So, we'll talk a little more about that later. Anyway, that's pretty big news. Also on the docket, next week's show is with Mark Stanley and Clifton Taylor discussing their new training program, the Studio School of Design. You'll hear details of this on next week's show, so be sure to tune in next Saturday for episode 215. Also, Steve, what's happening with the National Portfolio Review?
Yes, the National Portfolio Week is coming up. It's something different this year. A number of showcases are combining our efforts. So we have the National Portfolio Review, Design Showcase East, Yale, NYU, Carnegie Mellon, Cal Arts. We're putting everything together for a week of virtual showcases, and this will be May 24th through the 29th. So for that entire week, if you are a student and you're wanting to see kind of how graduate students put together websites and portfolios, if you want to see what their work is in relationship to the school they went to, so you might be looking at that school for a graduate degree, that week, which is May 24th through the 29th, will be a good thing to log on and see. And for that matter, you can chat with the students if you want to. You can set up either a 15-minute interview or a 30-minute interview with them and talk about their work and maybe talk about their experiences and where they're heading. I'll post all this information to our Facebook site.
Cool. Very cool. My question is, a lot of these schools are in multiple portfolio events, aren't they? Isn't Cal Arts doing some other ones? And I'm really confused.
I mean, some of our students will be at Design Showcase West, the UCLA event. What we're finding really is, I don't know that in-person portfolio reviews have a future. I think the virtual review may be where we're heading. Yep. And I mean, last year, we had something goofy like just Design Showcase East had 6,000 hits on the website and scheduled 600 interviews with our students. And this way, it's like you guys. You can decide you're going to be home on Thursday from 3 to 5 for some reason and interview students then. You don't have to, get in the subway and cross town and
pay a lot of money.
Well, I mean, you can do this at your own leisure, and I think we get a much better turnout. Last year was very successful, and this year I think will be even more successful.
I will say that portfolio season tended to be the catch up with all of your friends in the industry season, right. Which was a bonus for those of us that weren't the students at the time.
Right. It's interesting because I firmly believe that IRTA will never again have personal portfolios presentations. It makes no sense because it's so expensive to fly out to Chicago or New York, wherever you're going to have it. And, and then the hotel rooms and everything else. I think it's just much better doing online. And that way you have time with the student. It's not noisy. You're not being rushed. All that stuff is extremely negative when you're trying to find the right graduate school and find the right student. So, we'll see. We'll see what IRTA does. Any word from IRTA?
No, I haven't heard anything. They always have that satellite event at LDI.
Right.
And then, of course, late January, early February in Chicago. But, you bring up a good point. It is incredibly expensive, not only for the schools to send faculty, but for the students who are, heading off to Chicago to interview. And then a few months later, they're packing their bags and they're moving to Kansas City or Gainesville or LA. So it's a double hit on them. Anything to save them money, I think, is a good idea. And you're right. The interviews last year, the dead silence without the chairs rattling around and people running around the room and, getting kind of the college rush from someone who was coming to your table, 2 minutes early. I didn't think I was going to like it, and it was so much better.
Yeah, I bet. So also in the news, Bill and Melinda Gates are divorcing after 27 years.
I want to know who gets control of the microchips.
Yeah, microchips. Who controls the microchips? This should be a movie.
Yes. or do you think when they split the population, for those of us that have been vaccinated and have the microchip, that they'll just split the population, or they get half control of each body? Like Melinda gets my legs, Bill gets my hands.
Why would they want your legs and hands? I guess is the question.
I'm referencing the hoaxes.
Oh, yes. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Cut that out.
No, it's good. It's funny.
Cut from the show.
No, it's good.
Gone.
Oh, God. But anyway, I want to be the damn attorney. Can you imagine being one of those attorneys? But from what I hear, it's not going to be contentious. They only need to split up like $27 billion or something like that.
Oh, that's all.
So just split it in half. Man.
They could end world hunger, or they could split it in half, whatever.
Or they could buy a country.
Or two.
Yeah, and a couple of islands for change. And finally, tonight, this is what I've been looking forward for 2 weeks. I've been looking forward to this. Tonight, which is May 8th, Saturday night, Elon Musk hosts Saturday Night Live. Now, the stories that are coming out of New York are hysterical because apparently he has pissed so many people off that nobody wants to be on the show with him, including the cast.
Oh, my goodness.
This is going to be very, very interesting.
I'm curious if he's going to promote the cryptocurrency that he's been supporting, the Dogecoin.
There's going to be a skit about that.
Oh, there's got to be.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be.
It's going to be interesting. So all that being said, that's our news for the day. And Steve has our first question.
Whoa, not so fast, my friend.
Whoa, did I leave something out?
Well, you just brought up Saturday Night Live.
Right.
And it just dawned on me. Driscoll is now a member of the 5-Timer Club.
That's the 5-Timer.
The 5-Timer Club. Don't you remember the 5-Timer Club on Saturday Night Live? That's when you had hosted for 5 times.
Oh.
You got the smoking jacket and you got to go sit in a room with Steve Martin while he, Driscoll's at that point now. This is his 5th time with us.
Oh my God.
We have to send him the smoking jacket. We've got to give him the 24-hour access to the Facebook page.
Well, he gets 24-hour access to the toilet. We do have at Light Talk Central a special VIP toilet.
Ooh.
With your own personal trough.
Oh.
So there you go.
And then we can P-trap it.
And I get to sit in the smoking room with my jacket on with Steve Woods, not Steve Martin.
That's right. That's right. It'd be sort of like Playboy After Dark, if you remember that show.
Oh,
Driscoll, that was before you were born.
No, it wasn't. I remember.
Playboy After Dark was fantastic.
I used to watch that Scramble channel.
All right, let's get on to the questions.
Okay, so Jessica in the great state of Ohio writes, do you hang spares? If so, how many and where? All right, that's a good question. It's not so much, where do I hang them? It's why do I hang them?
Exactly.
That's the thing. So I think if you're doing a show, you have to keep into mind, changes happen. So it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of extra equipment sitting around. So, it saves you with cost. If you're in New York, you can't really just hop in a cab and go rent a light and come back to the theater. That's going to be really expensive. So this idea of spares is not a bad idea. Back in the day, I never hung spares in rock and roll. But if I were doing a theater show or a dance piece, I might put 9 extra circuits in the air. So, think downstage, midstage, upstage. So 3 circuits on each pipe. And I might stick a couple extra circuits on one of the booms, a downstage boom, and an upstage boom. I didn't really hang lights. The lights were kind of in the closet, so that it was very easy once the show opened to send those lights back to the rental company. I believe what we're finding now, and certainly Driscoll can address this better than I can because I do not have a career in New York as he does. I think we're finding that moving lights are becoming kind of the new spare. What do you think, Driscoll?
I would agree. I do think that moving lights are the new spare, even in small venues. I still put spares in plots because a Leko is still cheaper than a moving light. And as you said, we can mail them back with correct postage. But you can send them back, and it gets taken out of the rental for the weekly. But I remember in grad school doing plots, and Alan Lee Hughes, my professor, had a production electrician come look at our plots for a project. And he basically just went through and marked up the plot everywhere there needed to be a spare and just said, no producer will let you hang a plot where you know what every light is doing because they don't want to spend the money on a crew running a circuit, hanging the light, all of that. They need to just send someone up in the lift, focus it, and call it done because you can't afford it otherwise.
And that's a good point because it's the cabling that takes forever. Mm-hmm. So getting all those spare circuits in the air and patch, that's 2/3 of the battle right there. You're not trying to take the cable off the pipe and send that back to the rental shop.
Yeah, and plus if it's a counterweight system, you're going to have to reweigh the pipe. It's a pain in the butt, and you're going to probably have to have a much larger crew called to do that, to add that light, than if you were just going to obviously turn on a spare. Back when I started, and Gilbert was teaching me how to do all this, he called them gamoots, or get me out of trouble light. And the very first plot I ever worked on with Gilbert, there were like 400 fixtures on it, and maybe 20% of them had designations of where they were going in color. And I asked him, I said, how about these other 300 lights? And he said, oh, those are my gamoots. And he would just basically come in and point at the lights. Okay, let's put that here. Let's put that there. And then, of course, it was up to me as an assistant to assign dimmers and channels and things like that for these lights and to make sure the right colors got up. But it is a lot faster. Yes, spares, absolutely.
The other thing that I run into every now and then is if you have too many spares, mm-hmm. you might have an electrician questioning or wondering what you're doing. So I give them a name or a purpose, and anybody that's worked with me knows that if you see Crockett as a purpose, that is actually my dog's name, and the light is a spare.
Do you have Crockett 1, Crockett 2, Crockett 3?
No, they're just all Crockett. So people think that I have some wild, giant idea in the project that is just going to light up the whole stage with this Crockett
It's a gobo
idea.
Wash of the Crockett gobo. I've seen that gobo. It's a bunch of dog pores.
Exactly. Pete in Utah asks, when working with large-scale projections in theater and specifying equipment, what is more important, contrast or resolution? I would say brightness.
No, you don't get to write your own damn question.
It doesn't say contrast, resolution, or brightness. It says contrast or resolution.
I know. I would say that contrast is more important to me because, resolution... You don't want it to be pixelated, but everybody's at least 30 feet away.
Right.
So it starts to blend, unless you're way out of proportion. But at that point, if you're that big and you have that low resolution, you're probably not bright at all. You're probably very, very dim.
Right.
So I would say I opt for I go better contrast over resolution.
Well, for people who listen to the show, they all know what I feel.
What is yours, resolution?
Well, no. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is contrast is everything.
Contrast
in
equals
all
interest.
Aspects of lighting.
Yes.
And also of food, by the way. Because look, if you eat filet mignon that's perfectly cooked every single time, after a while that filet is going to sort of taste the same, not be that big of a deal. But if you have a crappy In-N-Out burger one day and then you have a filet mignon, that contrast between quality of that In-N-Out burger and the filet mignon is going to really make that filet mignon taste a lot better. So that's why contrast is super, super important. And exactly what Driscoll said, if you're going to be 30, 40, 50 feet away from this, the difference between 1080p and 4K, you're not going to see the difference. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Driscoll, but A, it's going to be much more expensive for the equipment, and B, it's not going to be as bright.
And C, did you really use 4K content? I mean, most of the time, most productions are using 1080p. So why buy the 4K projector if you're only delivering it with 1080p content?
That's right.
So
I was thinking about that for a second, all the hearts that were being broken. Why can't I buy the most expensive projector and use it, even though I don't have the content to project on it?
Well, the fans are going to be noisier. There's so many things you have to take into consideration when you specify projection equipment and lighting equipment, obviously, and noise is one of them. And usually some of your projectors are going to be out front. You got to want to keep those suckers quiet as possible.
yeah. It's right back to episode 211, if you will.
I remember 211.
It seems like it was just a week or so ago.
It was just... But yeah, exactly. Like, it's the fan noises. And I think Paul Curran asked that question of us.
That's right. He asked 2 questions. We should have charged him for those questions.
We should have.
It was really, out of bounds, but that's right. We love Paul. So Kate in Georgia writes, why do some designers specify top hats on all their fixtures? Well, this is a very interesting question because I asked, why don't they specify top hats? Because to me, especially for fixtures that are in front of house, you don't want to see the gel frame. You don't want to see the lenses as an audience member. You want a nice, clean look. And top hats will give you that nice, clean look for the most part. And I was looking at the new Series 3 lens barrels. One nice thing about those Series 3s is that there's almost zero light leak coming out of the sides of those lights. I really couldn't see any, to tell you the truth. And if you're using some older fixtures, you're going to get some light leak. So it's really important to minimize as much of that light leak as possible. And you don't want to look up when a light is coming on. This is another little trick that I've talked about before, is that if you have lights that are on a box boom, and let's say, most of the audience sees that box boom, if that light goes from 0 to 70%, and it's a dark scene, and it's coming up, it doesn't really matter how fast it comes up, but if it's coming up from black, there is a very good chance that you're going to actually direct the audience's eyes up there. That audience is going to see that movement of light, and they're going to look up, and it's going to pull them away from the show real briefly. So if you had a top hat that's in that light, you're not going to see the lens. You're not going to see that light up. Also, one thing is that I always do, if indeed you do see the lens, is I never take the light totally to 0. I may just low it just a bit so that when it comes up, it'll actually, not be as distracting. But yes, I agree that I think that top hat should be in every light. Also, it helps keep the ambient light off of the borders and also off of legs as well. So that's how I feel. What do you guys do?
I'm an eyelash guy. So when do you use an eyelash rather than a top hat? That might be an interesting.
Like box booms, if you can see the reflected side of the, if you have like a cross light and you're seeing the reflection of the light glowing the side of the top hat, I'll use an eyelash.
Sure.
I'm probably bad about, I typically am a reactionary. I'll ask how many they have in-house and then use them where I can. And but I love the idea that these new Lekos have 0 light leak, because you're right. It drives me crazy when we're in the middle of a scene that was dark, and then you go to a slightly brighter scene, but the whole front of house, the whole auditorium lights up. And you're like, whoa, who turned on the house lights? Oh, no, that's just the front light.
Especially, I've talked about this again before, but especially at like the Fenice in Venice, which is all white. The interior is all white and gold. So when the orchestra lights come on, you might as well just have house lights on. It's like crazy because it's like reflects off of everything. So you're right. It is kind of distracting.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today's episode is sponsored by
Crafties, Craft Services of Malibu. A few days ago, I was on set for 10 hours of shooting. I got home late, exhausted and hungry, but I was so tired, I could not eat. I drank a warm cup of cow piss and then fell asleep in my lazy boy. Then back the next morning for another long day at the dungeon. My work schedule was keeping me from a much-needed nutritious meal, and the job was no better. Sure, craft services is there, but who has time to walk over? Everything has to be done right now, and we seem to always be behind schedule, yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean. Now be honest. How many times have you been on location and noticed not only the crew, but the cast is trying to set up for a shot with a half-eaten sandwich in their hand? It's particularly hard for the clapperboard girl. There she stands with a half-eaten sandwich stuck in her mouth, trying to slap the board. At least the director has a PA to hold his sandwich. What to do? That is where Crafty's Craft Services of Malibu comes in. They have introduced the face hugger feed bag, just like Seabiscuit used to use. And once you put it on, it's never going to come off. The weather-resistant pink PVC mesh feed bag is available at an economical bulk rate price. Use it once and toss it away. It comes with a webbing strap and a black plastic side buckle for easy adjustment. With the optional clear face mask, it doubles as your COVID-19 safety wear. And new for the summer shoot season, the reusable feed bag will come in black with your title embroidered on the front. Choose from DP, PA, grip, wardrobe, just a few of the dozens of work areas to choose from. But maybe you're a little too rugged for a mesh food bag. No worries, buy yourself a Klein canvas Lyman bag with a working load of 150 pounds. Just load that sucker up and chow down all day. We make a plastic insert for soup. Crafty's Craft Services of Malibu. Ciao, baby.
And now back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those crazy rabid ducks tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About has got to be all about the big news of the day. Broadway reopens on May 17th. That's in 2 weeks. Are you guys ready? We got like Busby Berkeley coming back with his entire cast on a bus, and they're like saying, "We're opening tonight on Broadway. Let's go ahead and go down and rehearse." And everything's built already. There are 200 pianos on stage, and they're ready to go. And they open up, and the audience is there. Wow. Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, I'm not bitter, but then Actors Equity will call them up and say, "Oh, by the way, you can't open this show because you don't have pink food bags. You don't have handkerchiefs for every third back pocket." Equity will screw this up if they possibly can. Good heavens!
I never thought about that, but you're right.
I hope they do. But Actors Equity has been a pill during the pandemic. So
this project that I'm working on next week remotely, just found out like 3 days ago that we actually can do the project because they were waiting on Actors Equity to give the sign off. And they thought it was going to have to be everybody at home doing it via Zoom. And we just got the sign off that the cast can do the show.
Interesting. So you think the union's going to screw this up?
I think the union is trying to figure this out, and it's it's every day of the week they're reinventing the wheel. Some new thing pops up and they come up. It's almost like, the production manager who has a rule book of what you should do in the theater, and then they discover a new rule just in case you bring your dog to the parking lot. It's like, no, I think SAG is working really hard to get it right, and Equity is just struggling.
Yeah, SAG is pretty much has it under control. I mean, they've been producing stuff during the whole pandemic pretty much.
Have the theaters announced how they're going to handle audiences yet? Is it going to be like every other seat they're selling 50% capacity or a third capacity?
Well, actually, some have, and a lot has to do with the local restrictions. Because even though Cuomo came out, because he's in this big pissing match with de Blasio right now, they both hate each other. It's really, really screwed up. But anyway, even though he says, yeah, we're opening up in 2 weeks, in Denver, it's going to be totally different. In California, it'll be different.
Well, I think the other thing they've got to, I don't want to seem like, Mr. Gloomy here, but they might throw a party and no one come. Are people from Ohio going to get in their cars and drive to New York? I mean, let's face it, that is a tourist industry.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in New York because, this morning I was watching Morning Joe, which was like my morning thing, and they always show the streets of New York, and it's empty. It's just like empty, deserted. So I don't know how long it's going to take to get wound up. From everything I've heard from Broadway people, they're saying that the soonest they can get started up anyway is in the fall, really, because they're going to have to get everybody together again. Plus getting the equipment. A lot of the equipment's already there, but now everybody's ramping up again. And it's going to take a while. It's going to take several months.
According to Forbes, even though the world is opening up in New York on May 19th, Broadway is not expected to open until September.
Right. That's what I had heard. But, all the news people are saying Broadway is going to open on May 17th. I'm thinking, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are people. I have friends that are where, I have a friend that's in New York and he was on Jagged Little Pill and he's back there right now in a hotel. And I have to assume they're working on revamping everything. Mm-hmm. But, if they just started that, they're definitely weeks, if not months away from actually getting an audience in there.
Well, I do think that's the thing that the average civilian doesn't take into consideration. It takes a while for a company to come back up to speed to be able to perform the piece.
Absolutely.
It takes a while to get the theater back up and running. It's not like they just unlock the doors and, the company of Sound and Music walks in and goes, "Hey, let's do a show at 2:00."
Steve, you mentioned earlier about the Dallas Opera.
Yes, I'm not sure what they're doing. I mean, they're like every other theater company in North America. They're making plans. They're trying to get going again, and there always seems to be just a little hiccup somewhere that causes them a problem. I think as you know it well. I mean, an orchestra. That's a lot of people
right, in a small
breathing
place.
And spitting and coughing in a small place down there. It's opera. Do we really want to put a mask on every opera singer's face? I mean, you can do that, for this one or two events, I guess, and make it novel. But that's, certainly not the way to do a season. I think, people are continuing to be hurt by this. And we now have a vaccination, so we think, it's all right. It's just going to boom. There it is next week.
Look at India. Look what's happening in India. It's horrible.
Most of the world is struggling.
Right. And people need to remember that this is a worldwide pandemic, and because of we're citizens of the world and we have airplanes flying from country to country, that whatever happens in India is going to affect us. India's success is our success. And we have to start thinking about this in that way. Otherwise, we're going to be screwed. There's going to be some mutation that forms, and then we're going to have to all get vaccinated again. We need to consider this a worldwide problem and support these countries. It's not just America first. It's America everywhere. We need to treat other countries as if we treat ourselves. Hopefully better than we treat ourselves.
Well, I mean, I'm ready. I'm ready to go to an arena and see a rock and roll show.
So am I.
I'm absolutely wanting to go.
Driscoll, have you received any calls basically saying, hey, that show that we had scheduled for November, it's on again? I
have two shows that I designed previously that closed that are remounting.
Right.
One in Utah, this barber that I've done several times, and then this play in New York or in New Jersey at Two River Theater. They actually are the exact same tech dates, so I'm not sure what's happening with that yet.
Why would this be any different from normal?
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, they're the same day.
You can do that.
A Barber at Atlanta Opera is happening in February of next year. So, I mean, things are now popping back up on the calendar. Dallas the opera is going to go ahead in October and do their gala. But it's going to be a much different sort of thing than they've ever done. And Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra is doing their 4th of July thing again on TV and with an audience at Dickies Arena, where you can actually socially distance the orchestra. Most pits in America you can't. But in a giant sports arena, you can socially distance an orchestra. So, I mean, that's what's the news that's coming up on my end of things is that it's really about like September, October, that people are thinking they're going to be able to do things again, and then like weird little projects happening in between that aren't necessarily fully audience based.
And probably Driscoll and I are working on a new major ballet at the Windspear Opera in April or May.
Yep. So anyway, the upshot of this is we don't know if it's going to work or not, but we are hoping that it does, because it's our livelihood and it's our art and it's our friends' arts too. So anyway, let's see how it goes. Let's keep our fingers crossed. So Steve has our last question of the day.
Kane in Wisconsin writes, what is going to happen to all the small theaters with confined spaces when we have no options but to install LED Lekos? Forget about the price. The fixtures from ETC, Strand, Martin are all huge. My grid is only 9 feet off the deck.
We talked about this last week. Kane, were you listening?
Suck it, Kane.
Kane was not listening last week, although it's snail mail, so who knows, right?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for like a Source 4 Junior and an LED Leko, I don't think that's happening anytime in your lifetime. I mean, there is the size is kind of tied to the LED array on the inside of the fixture. So I don't know. I haven't heard anybody talking about miniaturization for a Leko. They're struggling to make it as small as it is right now. You know, ETC and Strand are cheating a little bit. Both of them have that shroud on the front of their light. And what they're saying is, oh, it's the same size as a regular Leko, but we have a shroud up here that's like a top hat. So really, it's no bigger than it ever was.
Well, I have some inside information, but I can't reveal it. But something small, something very small that's LED powered is coming our way.
That's Leko based, shutters and gobo and all that.
Yes.
That's exciting.
And also on the other hand, I think that what's going to have to happen in the meantime is that you're going to have to find some LED fixtures that aren't Leko based and work with those. And you don't always need a Leko. You can get by without a Leko. So maybe it's adjusting for those times. But I think that that pretty soon you're going to see some that are going to be much smaller, not maybe the quality of you're going to get from a Series 3 type of fixture, but it's going to be workable. But again, we have the cost. And like we talked about last week with the chip problems, there's like a big problem right now with just getting parts, to build these things. So we shall see.
Yeah, I just read from Motley Fool, the new go-to company is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. That is going to be, they're investing $2.5 billion in building a new manufacturing plant, and they still can't keep up. And they simply build. They don't. They're not in competition with the people who create the chip. They cannot build enough chips. They think it's going to be a shortage for 3 years at least, which is going to really impact all of these moving light companies and all these companies that are building LED fixtures. They're going to be hit so hard by this. Give it another 6 months, and let's see if Strand and ETC are still, producing, and Martin for that matter, state-of-the-art LED fixtures, or if they're at the back of the line because GM and SpaceX is getting priority on chip sales.
We shall see. I mean, with the whole chip thing, we may be going back to the abacus.
Oh, my goodness.
We'll be going back to Blackberries and like old-fashioned calculators and cash registers and things like that.
So I'd go ahead and buy 2 Grand MA3s right now while you can still get them.
And I have a couple of pagers I'll sell you guys.
There you go. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning. Oh, wait. Something just came over the wire. There's news that just hit the wire right now.
What?
I know, it's crazy. Light Talk in the next 2 weeks is going to hit 250,000 downloads. That's 250,000 downloads. But that's pretty damn big news, isn't it?
That's huge.
250,000 people. Wow.
Yeah.
No, 250,000 downloads. See, I like to think about 250,000 people, but I don't think there are 250,000 people that are interested in stage lighting. Certainly not.
Yes. But how often do you sit there and listen to a podcast with a friend? It could be 500,000 people.
It could be 500,000. You're absolutely right. So 500,000 people. No, in the next 2 weeks, we should hit 250,000 downloads, which I think that's pretty damn cool. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you decide to litigate, the law firm of Fleck, Flocked, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, the suburbs of Dallas, the heart of Dallas.
How many places in Dallas are there?
Yeah.
The strip clubs in Dallas. What the hell? And be sure to join us next week when we welcome back Mark Stanley and Clifton Taylor to Light Talk.
All that and a new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor from around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Light Talk.